Welcome to the Becoming Baby Ready podcast, your podcast for queer family planning. My name is Sam, and throughout this podcast, you'll hear me have conversations with professionals who work alongside people who want to start and grow their families, as well as parents of intentionally created families. Everyone I speak to identifies as being part of the 2S LGBTQIA+ community. This is your opportunity to learn answers to questions you didn't even know you had. Wow, my conversation today with Danielle and Paige goes international. We talk about using a known donor and how to ensure that you have some idea how many half-siblings your child or children may end up with when you're using a donor. We talk about IVF and harvesting eggs, birth, labor, all of it. And Paige is a pediatrician. So it's an interesting conversation. I don't think you'll want to miss it. Welcome, everyone. Today, I'm excited to introduce you to Danielle and Paige, and together they are parents, and they are professionals who work in the capacity of supporting those who have created families, or are creating families. So to that end, welcome, Danielle and Paige. I'm going to ask you together to tell me a little bit about who you are and the members of your family.
Sure.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Yeah.
My name's Paige Kennedy, and we have one little son who's 1 year old together.
Yay.
We live outside of DC in Virginia. I'm a practicing pediatrician, and together we've also started a family building company, which I'll let Danielle touch on a little bit more.
Yeah, and I'm a lawyer by background, but I like to say a recovered lawyer because that was a rough career that I chose. No one counseled me. But anyway, yes, then when we went through our family building process, we started a company together to try to address the major concerns we had, thinking there'll be a few other people who probably have these concerns. And the response that we've gotten from the community about how pretty much a majority of the community seems to have the same concerns as us has been really overwhelming and amazing. And it's become my full-time job, but one day I'll convince her. She loves practicing. I
was going to say, most of the pediatricians I've met in my career have really, once they've gotten into it because it speaks to their soul, and you can't really ever take them
I'll
out
never
of it,
pull
right?
her away.
Exactly. She's dragged me to part-time, but I get so much joy from my patients and families and all of that. So
I bet.
maybe one day, but no time soon.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
That's the retirement plan. Keep working, but just at the family business instead. So you have one son, and he's 1 year old. And so who carried, or did either of you carry?
Yeah, I carried and used my own egg just because I am older. And I also have BRCA, which is a breast cancer gene, and wanted to, I was worried about the fact that I'd have half the embryos kind of, that I'd have to discard because not wanting to pass it on. And so, so I ended up carrying, and Paige will go next whenever we are able to take a second get on.
Yeah, you sound busy. I'm not sure how you're going to slow that down long
We're
enough
to figure it out.
Have it happen. That is one of the advantages, I feel like, of our community going into the whole reproductive journey. We know we're going to need assistance. And so you know that you carry the BRCA gene, so you know that you're going to want to have genetic screening done so that you can not pass that on if at all possible. So then it just makes it simple to just do the IVF route. Let's retrieve some eggs, let's fertilize them, let's test them, and move forward from there. Is that kind of the path that you chose to take?
That's exactly it. I don't know what I would have done before because I wasn't at the point of thinking about IUI versus IVF. We weren't even engaged when I found out, but it made me go directly to IVF. And I will say that you can speak to this, but even Paige, who doesn't have the BRCA gene, decided to do IVF because there are a lot of benefits.
Sure. We honestly wanted the ability to do reciprocal IVF if it came to it. And I was working at a big hospital, so I had to take advantage of the insurance plan that I had at the time. And of course, now I'm at a smaller practice where insurance coverage for fertility benefits is not wonderful. I'm not sure if Canada's different than the US, but
not when it comes to fertility.
Yeah. So we both froze bunch of eggs and made some embryos with our donor, who we absolutely adore, and now have a bunch of frozen M babies, as they call them.
that we wish we could put as dependents on our taxes, but here we are.
Someday, once you actually process them a little bit further, right?
Yeah, it's confusing.
Okay, so you've hinted at the fact that you know your donor,
Yeah.
and I mean, I also know who I'm talking to, so I understand why you know your donor, but listeners may not. So can you dive into that a little bit more? Because that is a conversation that for some couples can really stop them in their tracks. Two people coming together can have extremely strong feelings on either side of the fence about whether to use a known donor or an unknown donor and that kind of thing. So can you sort of start at the beginning for us and tell us, did you come to this both from the same page, and how did you come to the decision that you were at when you chose your donor?
Yeah, so like from the start, there's, I would say there, when we started looking for sperm, there was 4 different avenues we could take,
We
right?
weren't even aware of the 4 avenues in the beginning, remember?
No, well,
We
depends how
jumped
we look at
in,
it.
we jumped in
Oh,
the
that's true.
process,
That's true.
being like, let's look through the banks like every queer family does. We were like, let's dive into Zytex, California Cryo, all these massive anonymous or open ID sperm banks.
Which have different names, I think, in Canada, but they're still
Yes.
imported by those places.
Oh,
But
sure. Yeah.
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 So we started scrolling through those, just kind of ignorant to all the possibilities in the very beginning. And we looked through, I remember we were on a long drive from the beach together and we were looking through and I was like, I don't see anybody. Maybe we can switch who's driving. You can scroll through and see if you find anyone you're comfortable with. All of these people, we were getting baby pictures and maybe some of the banks were giving us adult photos. And once we saw the adult photos, we're not the most
quickly
comfortable.
changed.
We saw a
Yeah.
lot of very young looking men, which also as women in our 20s, 30s, we were like, oh, I
But
don't
it literally
know
made us feel like pedophiles.
if I
Like
want
it
an
was
18-year-old.
it was a very
Yeah.
strange feeling to be looking at young kids and making a decision about what sperm you want to buy. Like
Yeah.
that's not what we're doing. So
Yeah.
anyway.
So pretty quickly we felt really uncomfortable looking through those. I think we were having some sort of gut feeling that this was not the right process for us and not the right avenue, but we couldn't really put a finger on it. And at that point, we had no idea if there even were other options. We were starting to think about friends and family members and who else could we ask if it's not going to be somebody from the bank. And going back to the banks, I'm a pediatrician, so I'm very type A about medical history, super,
Sure.
super type A. So I was like, we're getting this medical history, a snapshot into an 18 to 20-year-old's life where, they probably don't have very much medical history themselves at 18 because most of us develop any new conditions 20s, 30s, 40s. And then how much does an 18-year-old, you have 2 sons, how much does an 18-year-old know about their family's medical history when they're reporting it to this like big bank
Sure.
process? And they were almost too good to be true. Like I've taken medical histories my entire life of all these families, and it's very rare that you hear healthy, 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 no major conditions. So I had some red flags there as well. And it just didn't feel right for
And
us.
I was completely freaked out by how many half siblings our kids were going to have. That was a sticking point for me. I was like, how are we supposed to have these kids and feel comfortable with them doing a 23andMe and not like being overwhelmed? Like I know for myself, if I found out about one half sibling, I would go down a rabbit hole of like, who is this person? Like, well, what do I even know? Like it would just be.
It's kind of ironic actually, because a year before I did 23andMe and found out that I have a half sibling I had no idea about just from my father's past. And that to me felt groundbreakingly shocking. Like my world just completely like catapulted into what I thought was this white picket fence family to like, wow, I have a little bit more density to my family history here. So for me, it was like, yeah, that was one. So imagine 300 or 500 half siblings that you're finding out about.
So we just kept feeling more and more uncomfortable about it all. And then we found out gay men can't donate. And then at least in America, I don't know what the rules are in Canada, but
off the top of my head, I don't know.
Well, I will say that like most of the sperm in Canada is imported from the US anyway. So in theory, most of the donors can't be gay because of our rules, right? So we'll blame the US for that though, for sure. And then we've kind of felt like, how are they taking all of our money as lesbians and
queer
families and then, excluding part of our community and not being open about that. And most queer families who buy sperm don't know that. And so we felt very uncomfortable about that too. But I would say like going back to big picture, like just what the options are for people before we kind of came around was using a bank and having completely anonymous sperm donors, right? And you won't ever really be told the name of that person by the bank. It is totally anonymous. If you're lucky, they've done a 23andMe type of test and you can kind of trace them down. Second option, open ID. And what a lot of people think known is open ID or open disclosure, they call it. And that is when kids turn 18, they are allowed to find out the name and the contact information of the donor. There is no guarantee that the donor has the same contact information as 18 or 20 years ago when he donated. And there's also no guarantee that they'll even answer, but you get their name and phone number.
Mm-hmm.
Then on the other end of the spectrum, there's using a friend or family member, right? One, like the person who's not using eggs as brother or cousin or, best friend or whatever it is. And then there's like the Facebook groups, which is very unfortunate, of people that you don't really know and you don't really trust. And it's a very, there's no one monitoring it. There's a lot of those people are literally from banks, have donated to banks and have already hundreds of kids out there. And now they're donating on Facebook groups. So for us, we were like,
Which
none
is
of these.
very much legally not sound, by the way. So if anyone's listening and thinking about a Facebook group, while I understand cost effectiveness and the fact that LGBTQ family building is insanely expensive, the legality behind it of not having an agreement, not having your proper STI testing and everything else that needs to be done in place ahead of time.
Not as safe.
She's the lawyer, but honestly, it's a scary prospect because those donors could come after your kids if you don't do it the right way. If you do it the right way, very, very safe. And we can talk about that later.
Yeah.
Sorry.
And so we felt like there was just none of those options were perfect for us, right? None of them were really what we wanted.
Mm-hmm.
And then I guess our story is that we went and found what we wanted. We created a group, we interviewed hundreds of donors, I think about 200 donors for ourselves. And we kind of did, I know it was insane.
I was in residency training doing 80 weeks and I would come home at 8 p.m. and hop on a little Zoom with
back-to-back Zooms.
Back-to-back, very adorable, kind, smart, attractive, everything going for them guys that have beautiful hearts and were willing to do this for us. And we were trying to find the exact right connection and match and family history.
Yeah. So we found our own donor through kind of word of mouth and outreach and all of that stuff and decided that we wanted to put the people who wanted to donate in a kind way, not in I want to spread my seed and have a million kids out there way,
Mm-hmm.
with the people who really needed it and wanted to feel more comfortable about the conception of their kids.
Excellent. So from that, you found your donor.
We found our donor.
And is your donor relatively geographically close to you?
Good point.
Yeah, he's in Italy.
And this kind of happened not even intentionally. And maybe we shouldn't be admitting that with some new laws that are being passed, but we really were looking for a donor within the US and just randomly happened to interview him and looked at each other afterwards and immediately thought, this is our donor. This is the guy for us. And then our second thought was, are we psychotic? How is this ever going to work with him living in Italy?
Right.
But he was exactly filled every box. He's kind, close with his family, extremely healthy family history, has a look that kind of mirrors us both a little bit, which was something that was pretty important to us. And truly just the connection that we had with him was so seamless. It felt like he was family, which he now is. And I think that is something that you can't buy. So for that, we were very much on board and we were we must make this work. We must make this happen. So we are a little bit crazy for going outside the US. I promise there are amazing guys within the US too.
And I think at the time we were this is great. It'll cause a big distance between us. There won't be this need to have close contact and stuff like that. And now we're why doesn't he live closer? This sucks. We wish we could see him more. And so we definitely, our minds changed a lot about what the involvement or communication we wanted would be. And I think, in an ideal world, he'd live in the US and at least driving distance or some things that we could see more often and really have him play a role in our kids' lives in a way of a gunkle or a cousin that they see once in a while.
An uncle.
Uncle. Sorry. I know. I say gunkle now because I talk to everyone's queer that I talk to. I'm just, everything has a G in front of it. Uncle, I should say.
It actually I didn't even notice it until Paige was gunkle. And I was I guess.
There's no uncles anymore. Everyone's a gunkle.
That's true. Or they should be. They should be if they're not.
Exactly.
They're the best. Okay, so you've raised a question for me though, because ultimately, your thinking, I presume, is because you haven't done this before, this is all new for the two of you. You're planning your family and you're thinking about someone else becoming involved on some level with the journey because we need someone else to become involved on some level. So your minds must be going, at least in part, to the worry that it sort of relates to people you know who've had children together and then the marriage ends or the relationship ends and then they have to worry about custody and things like that and somebody else interfering in the parenting process. So is that sort of what formulated the worry because when you say, the geography, him being so far away at first was appealing because it almost feels like he isn't looking over your shoulder. Is that maybe where some of that initial worry was rooted until you got to know him a little bit?
Think so. And I think it was partly like, what are his family members going to think, right? Like,
Mm,
are they going to want to come show up at our door and knock, which is now we know is like a crazy thought to have once you meet these people that
sure.
want to be donors. But yeah, it was worrying that we might not be able to peel back. Like, we'd rather be the ones that are like kind of wishing for more as opposed to the ones that are trying to peel back how much of a relationship there is.
Mm-hmm.
Then once we got to know him, and also now we've met his family, his parents, his brother, now we're like they're our family, so we don't need to feel that way. So I think, yeah, absolutely, that was part of the worry, is what could this relationship turn into.
I think that the world has sort of set us up for this, right?
Sure.
I think there's like this propaganda that has sort of started and people focus on the bad cases. And they'll take a
Mhm.
bad case where there is a custody battle. Like in the US, we had a really bad case where a donor wanted to be a parent after, and they made it sound so bad. Like, as queer women, like our rights aren't upheld for kids. And they said all of these terrible things, and the message got spread around the whole US queer scene, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
everyone was freaking out about it. And if you take time to read the case, it was a lesbian couple that had a kid, and the one who wasn't related to the kid was abusive towards the kid, and they ended up getting a divorce, and the woman who was biologically related to the kid started dating the sperm donor, and they ended up having another kid together, and then they were petitioning for the first kid, right? So
Yeah, and all of this being said, they had a legal agreement, but the non-biological mother did not include her name on the legal
which
agreement.
wasn't
So it was just the
meant.
bio mom and the donor being like, this is our conception story, and she was not even included. So
They didn't do
that
anything
was
that they should have. They didn't do
no
the
second
the
parent
psychological.
adoption.
They did at-home insemination. We don't even know if it was natural insemination, like sex or not, right? And so there's everything went wrong that could go wrong. Like this story will never happen again, right? Like
Right.
this is a once in a lifetime story. And everyone kind of took it as this fear. And so
Right.
when I think as queer people, when you hear stories like that, you start being like, well, these are my kids. Like, I don't want that to happen. I can't imagine, like that's going to be like my nightmare. And the
Mm.
truth is, if you do things right, this doesn't happen, right? Like we
Right.
don't have any cases where everyone did something right and the case turned out badly for the couple. So it's really frustrating. And I think it was ingrained in us as well, where we
Mhm.
were just like, we want someone who we know, we want all the benefits, but we don't really want to have that kind of closeness because
Mhm.
that won't be good for us. And I think well, first of all, we were wrong. I think it's amazing for us, right? Like we love it. We love like having someone there that cares about our kid and everything like that. But I think what we lost track of is what's good for the kid, because it's really hard to think about a kid that doesn't exist. It's not even conceived yet. It's not, right?
No, it's
Yeah.
true. It's true.
So, and I think that's where a lot of people kind of freak out at the beginning and are like, maybe anonymous is the best because I don't have to worry about them ever being involved. This is a two-person, like I want to feel more like we are a heterosexual couple that doesn't have to use a donor, etc. But that kid's gonna have questions. I mean, it's without fail almost that they
Mhm.
at least want to know where they come from.
Mhm.
And so that's where we were kind of like, I think we met the whole donor conceived people world. And and we really, that was our moment of waking up being like, oh my God, these are going to be humans and these
Mhm.
people are going to have thoughts and this is going to affect them more than us and we need to
Right.
start thinking about them. So
And now the thought of him trying to like intervene and even tell us anything about a parenting decision is
a joke.
so comical
Yeah.
in our minds. He's a 30-year-old guy living his best life. He's single, he's enjoying life, he's happy, he's totally in his own world, cares about our son a lot, but has never asked like, what did he have for dinner, or when are you going to send him to daycare or school, or like there would never be any sort of boundary crossing there.
He's just happy for us.
Yeah.
It's like amazing.
Yeah. And I think if you go in and set really good expectations as a unit, the unit being like all three of you, or if it's a single parent, the two of you, then I think it makes things easier down the line.
Absolutely. So I guess then my next question sort of roots in the fact that, as you alluded to, Paige, the news out of Italy with regard to queer families and queer family creation has not been positive at all in the last several years, even less so in the last couple of months.
Yeah.
Week.
Yeah.
And so did he have to come to the US to be able to participate, or was he able to do something in Italy and then ship it? And if so, how did he go about doing that?
Yeah. So
Right?
we flew him to our clinic,
You did. Okay.
which doesn't have to be the case if you use a donor in the US. You can always, they can donate in their own city and then ship it to wherever you live. But for us, he flew into the US and did donations and had to come back another time to do a second blood test to make sure that all of his SCI screening was still negative. And then we had a legal agreement with him, and we had a lawyer from Italy also review the legal agreement to make sure that it also corresponded with Italian law. And are also extremely lucky that him and his family, I don't think liberal is the word they use over there, but are very accepting and loving of all different forms, shapes, and sizes, and are very queer friendly, even his parents and grandparents, which you don't always find. And we're always very kind to us about everything. But
yeah. And I think also like the logistics of flying it from Europe is not
Right. And I have no idea. I've never flown
Yeah,
a
yeah.
sperm before, so
Yeah. I love it.
yeah. But it is to me, it's a reasonable question to ask, right? Because you don't know what you could possibly do, and especially in light of things recently, I would think that that would become more and more difficult. It's something I've said to friends of my wife and I are of Italian ancestry, and they keep telling us how beautiful the country is and how we should go. And I've said I'm a little bit cautious about going because of their current political state. They said, well, everybody's fine. And I think truthfully, my understanding is that the queer community is very socially very welcomed and loved, but politically is where it gets a little dicey. And then if you have an accident or something happens while you're gone, then how does that play out? So
Yeah, I
it's
think
logistical stuff.
most of Italy is very against this. It's unfortunately the leaders of Italy that are the ones that are pushing this forward. And I think that group has a lot of power, like the religious groups there. And but I would say like we just came back from a fertility conference and I met a doctor from there and he was like, he's an REI, like a
reproductive
endocrinologist, yeah.
I don't know what that stands for. And and he was like, we're all appalled, like we're all sick about this. And so it was nice to hear that, like, you know, this is not something where they're all like, yes, finally, you know, we don't want people. So I do think generally socially, I think you're right, right? Like, and even like the doctors and things like that, I think it's really not them that's doing this. So
yeah,
I don't know, we've always felt really great traveling to Italy. Like I've never felt unsafe.
You go to the touristy areas and the popular cities, Rome, Venice, everybody's going to be happy you're there.
Yeah, and we've never even had any looks or anything bad, but I understand it's frustrating because at this point almost nowhere is that gay friendly.
Yeah, it's part of traveling as queer families. We went to Maldives for our honeymoon without doing any research at all. And then as the plane was landing, everything was like there were big prayers in the flight. And Danielle mentioned to them that we were checking in for our honeymoon and they like did us both a look over and they were like, send your bags through extra security, ripped our bags apart, looked through everything. Yeah, you have to be careful traveling as a queer family, which I think as two femme presenting people, we have been lucky to not experience a lot of discrimination, but it's so important to do your research ahead of time. Like so important, which we very much learned on that trip.
When we went on our honeymoon, I actually called a queer travel agent and said, find us somewhere safe to go.
Yeah.
The last thing I want to do on a honeymoon is pretend I'm not married to this person.
Know.
Right?
Exactly.
But yes, but I digress. That's that's a whole other conversation. So you've found your donor. He's come to the US. He has offered you his sperm to use, and you have fertilized some eggs and IVF is clearly successful because you have a son. So tell me a little bit about that journey.
Yeah, so we
The
both
IVF journey?
the IVF journey, or
Yes,
do you
yes,
mind?
yeah.
We both did egg extractions around the same time, like within a few months of each other, and made the embryos. And so then we have that ready. And honestly, I think there's a lot of I think it affects everyone very differently. I probably should let you talk about this more, but for us, we really felt like it was not super harmful. Like we felt a little bloated and had like light symptoms, but we both did 2 egg extractions and felt like I would probably do 6 more, like without blinking an eye. No, but like it didn't affect me, right?
Right.
Like I'm not saying I want to do
that
6
far.
more.
I can't go that far.
I didn't feel affected by
As somebody with migraines, I definitely had migraines around it from all the hormone fluctuation.
Right.
I would say, of course, there are like discomforts along the way. And I think it does really affect some people a
It
lot
does
with like
affect some people, for sure.
OHSS, lots of different side effects you can have. But we felt that there was a lot of fear mongering on the internet about how terrible the shots were and how
Yeah.
invasive it was and how awful it was and how the egg extraction itself was very painful. And honestly, I think that we were like pleasantly surprised at how like the shots were something that easily like then became part of your routine. They're not comfortable, but they're not terrible. And the egg extraction itself was a beautiful little nap under propofol at our clinic. And
Oh my God, it was the best nap.
A lot of pain.
The best nap. I would, yeah.
But I do think there's like
Sign
an
me up.
emotional roller coaster to IVF, which I'm sure you've talked about a lot with other
Sure.
people on your podcast of you get so many eggs out and you're like, wow, yeah, 16, 18 eggs. This is awesome. And then the attrition rate of losing them at each step is a hard thing to swallow, which is why we both did 2 extractions, right? Like we went in thinking, hey, we have normal fertility numbers. We'll hopefully only have to do 1 each. And then you like see how many are mature eggs and then how many actually fertilize with the sperm and then how many become blastocysts and how many actually grow to day 5 blastocysts. And then after that, how many of them are genetically normal? And I think everybody goes through this and you can't really explain the feeling of loss at each step until you go through it yourself, where you go from 18 eggs to 2 embryos that are genetically normal in the end, which is still an amazing number. But I think that part is an emotional roller coaster. And then with Danielle, with her BRCA testing, she had to then exclude half of her embryos that were BRCA positive. Technically, we still have them frozen because they don't discard otherwise healthy embryos unless we ask them to. But yeah, so that was another extra step for her of needing to do extra. But yeah, as we said, it wasn't the worst thing in the world.
No, I'm a baby. I have like man colds, as people say. And I was like, I mean, in the first shot, I was shaking terribly. And then the second shot, I think we were doing in a bathroom stall at like a restaurant. So I think it ended up getting a lot better fast.
But again, it's that unknown. I have no idea how this is going to impact me. And I haven't loved doing ABC before this. So why is this going to be something that isn't so bad, right? So
yeah, for sure.
And Danielle,
hold on for just a moment. We'll be right back. You know about babyREADY because you're listening to this podcast, so you know that we are all about queer family planning and helping you have the family of your dreams. But did you know that we don't abandon you once your baby arrives? We actually offer parenting coaching as well, and that's not just for the newborn phase, although we are there for that, but it's through toddlerhood and young children, tweens, and even through the teen years. When you need someone unbiased to lend an ear so that they can hear where your struggles truly are and help you come up with a path and a plan that feels truly right for you and your individual family, don't hesitate to reach out. We are always happy to be there for you. Visit us at www.babyready.info for more information.
Ultimately got lucky and got pregnant on her first try. Like the embryo that she transferred, our son Lucas, has a 70% success rate of a live, like developing into a live birth, like a healthy live birth. So,
and it's hard, right? Like I don't know how the Canadian system works in terms of healthcare and stuff, like for covering IVF and IUI. But for IVF, like it is more expensive. But if you start to look at like the breakdown, and I would love to see like a big cost comparison of this, but if you do 5 tries of IUI, which sometimes is, you know, what it takes to get pregnant or even not get pregnant.
Often what it takes to get pregnant at a bare minimum. At
a bare minimum. That sometimes ends up translating to 1 cycle of IVF. And in that case, you are actually spending less at IVF, especially if you want to or more kids, because then you don't have to do 5 tries each time you want a kid. And then that's double what IVF would be basically. So, and usually people can have 2 kids with 1 egg extraction generally, unless there's something like mine, like it can happen. And so it ends up being a more cost-effective route long-term. But do people tell us this? No, like we just know 1 try of IUI is more
I don't
expensive.
think it's always the case. I think that's our
Maybe
twisted view. I think some people get pregnant on try 2.
No, true. It can happen, of course.
Absolutely.
But let's just say it's the norm and it takes 5. Like, people look at it as 1 try of IUI is cheaper than 1 try of IVF. And that's like not the apples to apples comparison that we can do. And it's also a very emotional roller coaster. We have a lot of clients trying IUI and it doesn't work for 5 tries, right? And that's 5 months of having bad news, although it is less invasive. And if it does, we have a client who it worked on the first try. So I can't say it doesn't happen. But it's almost a lottery at that
2
point.
points, yeah, that worked on the first try.
And I think that that's the case with any fertility whatsoever. Even if you're a cis-het couple who conceive on your own without reproductive assistance at all, there's a significant percentage of those individuals who emotionally struggle every month because now we're at the point in our lives where we're trying and we weren't successful for a few months. Sure, eventually we did, but there is still that emotional challenge that comes with that hope that happens every month that this was the time. And you convince yourself, right? You convince yourself, oh, do my breasts feel different? I think I'm definitely pregnant this time. And so for that not to happen is heart-wrenching over and over again because you've done that emotional roller coaster. So I can appreciate it. And not to mention the cost of sperm has increased exponentially since the beginning of COVID. Like I can't believe what people are paying for sperm. And then you're adding that onto the cost of an IUI process or procedure being done. So, I mean,
and at least in the US, if you're looking for a sperm donor that's not white, the cost of sperm is even higher.
Oh, yeah, because there's so few donors, 100%.
But the sperm's the same.
It is the same.
It's
it is the
insane.
same.
No
I fully
it's all supply demand and so unfair.
It's not shoes. We're selling DNA and keep like part of people, and we shouldn't be treating it like supply demand. But anyway,
I could get on a whole soapbox about why we have to spend so much money to procreate in the first place. It's
I know
it's asinine. But anyway, so you got pregnant first try of. I mean, I say you got pregnant first try. You had to find the donor. You had to extract your eggs twice. Yeah. You had to go through all of that. Then the first transfer resulted in a pregnancy that resulted in your son. How was your pregnancy and birth?
Oh man, you should not ask me that. I want people to actually have.
Sign up.
Yeah, I don't think this is.
So you did not love being pregnant or giving birth?
Pregnancy was fine.
Okay, pregnancy was
until
fine.
the end, where I was like a boat, and I had to like literally have a beeping backing up. Like I was like beep beep, like we're careful, I'm backing up.
Yield sign on your back.
Yeah, giving birth was not my favorite thing in the world.
Okay,
I had a really really traumatic birth where I pushed for 2 hours, 3 hours. Thank you. I've tried to black it out. I pushed for 3 hours and then ended up in a C-section, not because of a medical risk, but because the doctor pushed me to push earlier. Anyway, I'll let Paige.
I think as much as as somebody that's been at a lot of births on the pediatric side of things and watched a lot of births, I was trying to warn her of, hey, like this might not go as planned. There might have to be a plan A, B, C, D, E, F, G. There might be unexpected complications that come up, even for very healthy, otherwise normal pregnancies. And I think despite saying that, it's still, you can't like rationalize or see what that looks like. It's like
you're like, not me. Yeah.
You're like, that's not going to happen. This will all be fine. Our son did have an over 99th percentile head circumference. So that did not go in favor of this 5'2" person's pelvic outlet.
I'm actually really tall. She's lying. Okay, I'm just kidding.
But yeah, I mean, hers was rough in that we had a doctor that, I don't know if OBGYNs in Canada are a little bit more pro vaginal deliveries, but in the US, if things are not moving at a very specific pace, you're going to be pushed for a C-section, even at a stage in early labor when there's plenty of time. Everybody was healthy, doing well. They were saying, let's go do a C-section. And I was like, hey, she's 3 centimeters dilated. We got plenty of time. Everyone's doing great. Like, slow your horses. We had a doula with us too, who was wonderful and helping us out. But and like she said, pushed for 3 hours, ended up like being exhausted because we had been awake for 48 hours, did a C-section. And then she got the perk of ending up with postpartum preeclampsia and having to be on a magnesium drip for 24 hours, where you basically are made to feel like you have the flu right when you have a newborn and haven't slept for 2 days. And she doesn't even remember the first 24 hours of our son's life.
Which is awful for bonding. So
Yeah, I
where
was like,
everyone says you should do reciprocal IVF, and I'm like, if I was the one not related and the one who carried and the one who had this trauma, I would not be. I think it was good that we didn't in that case.
Yeah, yeah. And it taints your initial journey into parenthood, which then, you have to be, whether you're queer or straight, that kind of a journey affects and impacts your first weeks as a new parent too.
Yeah.
And all of that is not stuff that we typically spend a lot of time talking about, because especially we've paid the money, we've done the work, we wanted this baby so much, so we're supposed to love every single second of it. And it happens that sometimes we don't. Doesn't mean we don't love the baby. It means we don't love the parenting part, or the new parenting part, or the transition to parenthood as much. And
Right.
it's hard. It's really hard. So my heart hurts for you for what you had to struggle with.
It's great now. Although it wasn't great when we just put him on a flight and he screamed the whole time. That was, again, one of those moments where I was like, don't love parenting, but now it's good again.
You're on a flight, so you just asked for a beverage, right?
Yeah, or four. Yeah.
Oh, geez. Oh, no.
No, it's fine.
So then tell us a little bit more about your company. So what is your company? You said you talked to a couple hundred potential donors to find your own. And then you kept those kind of in a reserve, presumably not for yourself, especially for your own pregnancy, subsequent pregnancy journey. But what have you done with that, and what does that mean for your business going forward?
Yeah, and we didn't hold them in a reserve because we didn't even know that we'd start the company, honestly. We realized it later, but we the Seed Scout, that's the company name, is a known donor matchmaking service. We're trying to operate pretty opposite of banks in a lot of ways to try to make this path like a very different path that clients can go through or families can go through. But we essentially matchmake people looking for donors, for known donors, with known donors, people who want to be known donors. And we have a three family maximum. So a donor cannot donate to more than three families. All the families have to know each other and report births to each other, so there's no scare on 23andMe type tests. And with Paige's big push, just given the medical history background, was that the donor has to give a once-a-year update about medical history, so that parents will never wonder what updates there has been and worry about symptoms and whether it came from the donor side, and it could be bigger than what it is presenting as. I think you can speak to this, but you have a lot of patients that are donor conceived, and the scare of being a doctor and not knowing what to test for is horrific. But yeah, and so we do that. We have like 80 something percent LGBTQ donors. About 80 something percent of our clients are also LGBTQ. And we just want to make this better for the kids that we're creating as much as possible. And there's no shame in other options, or, whatever's best for everyone's family is the best thing for everyone. But for us, we just felt like we wanted something that was kind of more regulated, and having a 3-family limit, and us like really sticking to that, because I don't know if you guys know this in Canada as much, but for banks, when they say a family number like 35 or 45 or 25 or whatever it is, like a family limit, what they're doing is they're only counting families who report a live birth, which is about 30% of them. And because most people don't want their kids to be in a database as soon as they're born, right? And then they sell it to other countries. And then that doesn't count. So Canada's a big, one of those countries. So none of the people in Canada that are buying sperm from the US are counting towards that limit of 25, 35, 45 families.
And that can be frightening, I'm sure, to some families. I mean, some people are not bothered by that. They sort of think about their own silo, and others do stay up at night thinking about things like that, right? And you kind of get everybody in between. I think it is a little bit different here in some respects. In Canada, donors who are from Canada and donate within Canada can't be paid for it, much like surrogacy. It's an altruistic process for the physical banks, and so they aren't compensated for that. That isn't to say that a Canadian donor can't donate to a US bank and be paid for it. They absolutely can. But within Canada, if you have somebody in my city who's going to a fertility clinic to make a donation, they aren't reimbursed or compensated for that. They're not even compensated parking and things like that, where at least a surrogate gets some of those types of things, that any expenses a surrogate incurs is reimbursed for those here. So that piece is a little bit different. So to that, I only mean incentive to be wanting to donate in Canada changes a little bit. You often hear people who are doing it because their sister had trouble getting pregnant, or their friend had trouble getting pregnant, or they know they don't want children of their own, but they want to be able to help somebody who needs help. And I have spoken to many donors from Canada who have sort of had those same types of philosophies. They're not looking for anything back. They just want to be able to help somebody, but they don't necessarily want to be known. And I also think about 20 years ago where it wasn't really an option. People didn't know. So it is a little different, but
yeah, and I will say, I know, I just spoke to someone at this conference we were at in Australia or New Zealand, I think actually New Zealand, where they have the same rule, right? You can't pay donors. And she was telling me that there's a lot of downsides to that. First of all, there's a lack of donors, right? And at least in New Zealand, there's like a 2 or 3 year wait list for a donor, which is crazy. Yeah. And the other thing that she was noticing was that a lot of the donors are the ones that are mass donors. Like they're the ones that will do it for free. And then it takes away a lot of the people who would do it if they could at least be compensated for their time, like normal, not a huge. So I'm mixed on that. Like I think it's great. Yeah, I know. It's hard.
I don't think there's a perfect side to it at all when you come to it from that sort of thought process of should they be compensated, should they not be compensated? There's probably pros and cons on both sides.
Right.
Yeah,
but I do think that we don't get a lot of university students kind of thing, sort of back to what you were saying before, that people were so young doing it because then they could, I don't know, afford a case of beer for the weekend or something like that. I mean, now I'm being facetious, but they don't have the same motivations to necessarily want to go out and do it just because they can now that they've reached the age to be able to do it. So you see a lot more people
100 times. Like they don't have this motivation to really go in that many times. Like if you're getting $150 each donation at US Bank, you're gonna want to make a decent amount of money once you've gone through the steps. So that incentivizes them to go hundreds of times. But yeah.
So you've got this database. How does someone learn about you? Because presumably, well, and I shouldn't assume anything. I don't know the answers to any of these questions. But how does someone find out about you? You go to a fertility clinic, they typically will say, well, these are the banks that are out there. Are they doing that with your organization yet?
Some are.
Okay.
The main way is honestly different. Well, I mean, Paige and mine, but Paige does all of it because she's younger and better at computers. But Paige's TikTok, has definitely made an impression on people, and a lot of people are like, "Oh, that I feel the same thing as they did when they were looking."
And we have friends and now friends, I would say, in the donor conceived community that are trying to find an option for families that they think they would feel good about if their conception story had been that way. And so a lot of them are advocating for our process as a more ethical approach. So that's been helpful. And then there's been a lot of just word of mouth where clients send us other clients. These are my good friends that also want to conceive. We had a great experience with you and we'd love them to at least have a conversation with you. And Reddit, all of these different, the ways that people communicate within the queer community and within the single parent community is probably the biggest thing at this point.
Yeah. And we don't have a lack of clients, right? Like we have people begging to use this because this is a lot of people feel more comfortable with this option.
And it's never existed. It wasn't an option more than 2 years ago, unless you had a friend that you could find to donate.
Yep. So, and then donor wise, it's really a lot of word of mouth too. I think in the queer community, for male presenting men or male by birth men, it has kind of blown up as a name. And at this point, like a lot of people are reaching out to us. We've had people post about it, and a lot of people have kind of been interested from those posts. And I think, when they learn that it's not accepting for them to donate and this is the path that they could do it in a way that helps their own community, it's really been this beautiful people stepping up, right? People really wanting to make a difference in this world.
Queers helping queers.
Yeah,
Yes,
exactly.
that's the business
Absolutely.
model.
Which
Yeah.
ultimately this whole platform that I've created is all
Yeah.
about queers helping queers. Can you tell me, so if in the US gay men cannot donate, is that the law, or is it just because now so they're donating for you if they're gay men, so how do you circumvent the law if it is the law, or is it just oh, we haven't been doing it? I mean, I know the Red Cross has recently made moderate, very very moderate changes to blood donation, so is it,
Yeah, sort
what
of.
I'm asking you, so like
Yeah.
how do you do this?
Yeah. So the first, to answer your question, it's not a law. It
Okay.
is a recommendation from the FDA, which is our regulating body here.
Mhm.
And before recently, until there was a big case called the Chevron case in the US, recommendations had to be treated like law, which gave agencies a lot more power than it should have, because anytime they'd recommend something, everyone had to follow it by like matter of law. And finally, Chevron has the Chevron case changed that, and now we don't have to follow it unless it's actually written as law and adopted as law. So before it was technically law, I guess, if you're thinking about it that way. But it's only for anonymous donors. So the theory is that people can't waive a risk. I hate calling it a risk because gay men are not a risk, but
Mhm.
that's what the FDA calls it. That recipient parents cannot waive a risk if they don't even know who the donor is. So for anonymous donors, there's no way to waive the risk. You don't know the person at all. You can't waive it. And so that's why they're not allowed. But for us, they're getting to know the person. They can, get to know each other on a deeper level and understand what risks there are, if any, et cetera, and feel like if they feel comfortable with it, they can waive it.
Mhm.
So it's possible for known donors to be gay in the US.
Oh, okay.
But the rule is you can't have had sex with men in the last 5 years, which it doesn't take 5 years for HIV to show up on a blood test. And
also that's nearly zero gay men ever have not had sex with another man in the past 5 years. So it basically
even straight men.
it's essentially ruling them out.
Yep.
Yeah.
That, and I do, and like I said, that's why I say, the things are changing, but like they're not changing. They're just pretending to change.
It's a
Exactly.
facade.
And
It's a
Exactly.
facade.
you
Yeah.
know, as soon as they put that caveat in there,
And we
5-year
have heard
caveat, then
stories.
it's
We've heard stories of some open ID donors from the banks where the families have found out after the fact that their donor is gay, and these families are mostly queer families we've talked to, and they're like, "Yay!"
right.
But clearly, that also shows a little bit of how much it's regulated.
Well, and I mean, at least here, you can't ask someone I mean, I guess for medical reasons, that's why they're asking questions. And so they put it in, never mind. They put it under
Yeah,
that umbrella, but I think
exactly.
that's still
Exactly.
yucky and
Yep.
icky and ew. But,
Yep.
Yeah.
and Paige, you are a pediatrician when you're not doing your Seed Scout work
Yes.
and parenting your wee guy. Do you find that your practice has got a lot of, do you find that people come to you and want to have you as the pediatrician because they're queer parents and they want to queer parent, so that again, when you walk in and you sit down and talk, you're not, how to ask the questions about ancestry and things like that when
Yeah.
you're getting a medical history, because you said, you've collected histories for years.
Yeah,
Like,
absolutely.
there's
Yeah,
different
and of
ways to
course,
do it for the queer community. There just
yeah,
are.
absolutely. And I wouldn't say that people have come out and said, "Hey, we picked you because you're queer," but like I have probably the highest proportion of queer families like in my subset of patients, and I find it's just a different level of connection. You're exactly right. As I ask medical history, not asking like, so who's the mom? That's what we got, not at our pediatrician office, but in other areas of the medical field, like which one's the mom? And even that question is so invalidating. So absolutely, just knowing the right terminology, being able to just like understand what they're feeling and what they're going through and what their future could look like. I find that that connection is hard to find. So within that pediatrician professional community, absolutely, I have a lot of queer families, and it just continues to grow over time, which has been so fun. And on the other side of that, a lot of queer adolescents and queer young adults that are absolutely amazing. I have a lot of transgender patients that I get to work with every single day. So yeah, this is why she can't get me out of the pediatrician world too soon, because I think it's such a special bond you can have. And it's also really good representation for these queer children too, of, hey, look, that my doctor's a lesbian. How cool is that?
Yeah. And let's be honest, right now, especially in the world that we're living in, and this episode is being recorded before the election. It will not be dropped until after the election. That's just unfortunately how, so we have no idea what the world is going to look like in a few weeks.
Absolutely.
But
Yeah.
you are saving lives by treating trans kids with dignity and respect and giving them the medical care that they truly just quite simply deserve. You're saving lives, and I think that that is something that needs to be celebrated and acknowledged as well, because my fear is that there will be fewer of you in a few weeks than there may be now.
Yeah, I don't think you're wrong, unfortunately. We're lucky to, or I should say I'm very lucky to practice in a very blue state where everybody at my practice is super supportive of me seeing a lot of queer families and queer adolescents, but you're exactly right. In other areas, it's going to be harder to come by for sure.
Yeah. To that end, are you comfortable sharing what state you practice in, and are you taking new patients?
Yeah, I practice in Maryland in like the Rockville, Gaithersburg area, Potomac Pediatrics, and of course, I'm always accepting new patients, especially queer ones. Yes.
Excellent. And I say that only because you said that you're practicing in a blue state. And I'm like, you told people at the beginning you're in Virginia, and it's not necessarily known for
That's
being
true.
blue. So I
You're
thought maybe
exactly
I will
right.
just highlight that before people start
Yes.
going, I need to check my map again.
Yes. Well, I can get to the good side. Yes.
Fair enough, fair enough.
Yeah.
I just thought I would ask, because I think it is important for people to know that there are resources available to them, depending where they are. So if, let's say, somebody was living in Missouri, and obviously that's too far to travel to see you for as a pediatrician, could they reach out to your clinic and then be connected with other pediatricians who may not necessarily be queer, but are at least queer accepting? Do you have that kind of a resource within your organization?
Not within my organization. I did recently connect with somebody on, ironically, there's a queer moms physician Facebook group, like how many different titles, but it's literally,
Yeah.
so it's a bunch of like queer parents that are all physicians, and they've recently started to create a database. I'll try to send you the link. I don't know if you can add links to the bottom of a podcast.
I sure can in the show notes for sure.
And it's nationwide. And I put myself as a profile on there, and it's basically, what's your specialty? How do you identify? What are your pronouns? What do you love to treat? What are your passions? So it's a database that's being created of all like queer physicians out there, just so that people know where they can go for a safe place. Because you're exactly right. I can't imagine a queer child like being able to find a queer pediatrician, or I'm sure there are queer friendly pediatricians, but a queer pediatrician would be very hard to find in that area.
Yeah. And that isn't to say that there aren't some great ones out there even in the Midwest, which is more stereotypically not as queer friendly,
Yeah.
but you may have to, it can feel very vulnerable to be asking people for referrals for things like that. So to have a place to start
Yeah.
from, counts for a lot. And in the show notes, I also do want to put connections so that people can find Seed Scout. Is it seedscout.com or
TheSeedScout.com.
theseedscout.com? Excellent. And you guys are on Instagram, TikTok, all the things
All of it.
as the Seed Scout?
Yep. Correct.
Yes.
I think our TikTok's technically Seed Scout, but the rest is the Seed Scout.
And Love Can Win is our
And Love
personal,
Can Win is our personal one.
KENN.
Love it. I want to thank you both for taking the time to join me today. Before I let you go, I do always ask the same question at the end of every podcast. Please tell me, what are your very favorite parts of parenting your sweet wee boy?
Oh my God, don't ask me that right now after we just went on a flight. No, I'm just teasing. I'm teasing.
She had
teasing.
one bad 4-hour stretch. And
I'm
she's
just
like, I'm
messing
traumatized.
with Paige is rolling her eyes at me for the last like 4 now. No, teasing. He is the best. He is the best.
So hard
He
on
is
him.
so funny. I think like honestly finding things that like make him giggle, like if he touches our belly button and we act like we're like laughing, he thinks it's so fun. Like just the littlest thing, or him pointing out like dog, just like the memories that we're making with him is, I mean, you cannot replace that feeling. Like you absolutely cannot. There's nothing else in the world that feels like that.
100%.
Yeah. And being able to do it together has been so fun. Being able to see so much of Danielle and our son is such a blast for me. And I think people always wonder, like, the non-biological parent, how is their connection going to be to the child? Like,
She's obsessed.
I'm obsessed. And I honestly think we have like the same exact connection, very different connections, but like the same level of connection. It's never even something that crosses my mind that he's not my biological child. He's my son. And
She's
I
his
think,
safe space. It's crazy. Like from day one, she was his safe space. I don't think there's anything biological about that.
but yeah, it's just a blast. It's a blast doing it together. I think two queer people working together based on our experiences talking to heterosexual friends is a good thing. With like a shared mental load and all that. It's been a joy.
It is a totally different dynamic, and yet very similar to just anybody else who's raising a baby, right?
Yep.
Thank you so much for taking the time to join me today. I really, truly appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
Thank you for joining me today on the Becoming Baby Ready podcast. If you have a story that you'd like to share, or you know someone who might, if you're a professional who works in the capacity of helping people start and grow their families, and you identify as being a part of the 2S LGBTQIA plus community yourself, then please don't hesitate to reach out. We always have room for more stories to share, and there's always more learning to do.